Hey, welcome everyone to the ArchiCAD User Monthly Webinar. I am back and feeling pretty good. It's a hot day here today. I've been getting a lot of walking in and just got the go ahead from my doctor yesterday to start adding other exercises. It's been a month since my heart attack and hooray, I'm alive. Feel like I've got a new lease on life, a new 20-year lease. I'm 67, so 20 years would be a good amount. Anyway, let me know that you can hear me and see the screen. Or actually, I haven't shared the screen yet. All right, I see Nicole saying welcome back, Eric. Let me know where you're calling in from as well. And let me share the screen here. Which screen am I showing here? Good, at least that's the one I wanted. All right, Ian from Scotland. All right, okay. Todd in Des Moines, Iowa, 100 degrees, and Gerald, Bob, David. All right, thank you all for joining me today on, well, short notice, although if you're a regular, then you probably got a notice a week ago and, 24 hours ahead. So I have had a few questions sent in. I'm not sure who all is on the call who sent in a questions, but if you sent in a question and you're on the call, just type it in to the questions area to say, hey, I sent you a question about stairs or something like that, and then I'll be sure to look for that. And if you're in my ArchiCAD coaching program, you can use Slack to communicate. I'll try to go back and forth between the GoToWebinar questions area and Slack so I can see that. So for those of you who don't know what Slack is, it's a discussion forum or platform, and I can see that Will sent me a question and we have some nice greetings here and reference levels. Okay, okay, so yeah, thank you for reminding me there. You sent that a couple hours ago. All right, so, well, actually, let's see, you have this file here. Why don't we start with Will? I'm gonna download this. And what version of ArchiCAD is this in? So let me open up your line. So we have Will. Hey, Will. Your line is open.
Can you hear me okay?
I can, yep. So what version of ArchiCAD is this file in?
It's 24, Eric.
24, okay. So let me go and open that up. Let's see. Here, the Valentine V11. So we'll open it up, a separate window. And you had a question about setting the site topo mesh and reference levels coordinated. Okay, so we'll definitely look at that. What elevation is the project roughly?
So I have a walkout level with another story, a main level above that. So I wanted to begin with the walkout level and set that at about 25 feet above sea level.
Okay, so the walkout is about 25 feet above sea level. Now, one question is, what would you find most useful in terms of the project main reference level? Is it that walkout level and then you have things below it and you have things above it? Or do you want to have 0 be something more based on the lowest level of your project?
That would be basically the ground level. So that would be the lowest level.
Okay, so we can call that the project 0, and that is not 25 feet, it's less than that, 15 feet or whatever. And then of course you have sea level, which is down, a little bit below all of that. So does that make sense conceptually?
Yes, although when I started the project, I set the main level at project 0. So
the main level being the walkout level or the lower one?
So there would be a walkout level that would be the lowest level, and then the main level above that. and then actually another story
All right,
above
and
that.
so you set your main level as 0 and your walkout level is actually below.
Correct.
Okay, but would you prefer to have the walkout level be the 0 and then everything be positive numbers?
It doesn't matter too much to me. I mean, we don't need to probably walk through changing that as much as I did establish a mesh, as you can see there, and I couldn't figure out how to control it. Although if I look at the mesh in plan view and set an elevation marker on it, I do get the correct elevations.
Okay, all right. Let's see. So I see we have some grade here. Is that where the mesh would be?
So that's a section that I just dropped in there to make sure that my floor levels were working out in 3D
Mm-hmm.
in the actual model. So yes, that would be the level at 25 feet above sea level.
This would be 25 feet above sea level, this floor elevation.
Correct.
Okay, and do we have, okay, we have here, all right, so now, right now, so the walkout level, let's see, so walkout level, okay, so here's our walkout level, and you have it delineated on the left side, and it says minus 10 foot 4 3/4. So that is 25 feet above sea level?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to establish with the
Would
mesh.
you prefer these numbers here to be sea level related or to be related to your first level?
Just related to the project, I think.
And are you happy then with this first level being 0?
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Well, let's look at what your setup is in the project preferences, project location, because that's the first thing that we want to make sure is set correctly. So it says that your altitude for the project is 0. And yet this 0 here is 25 feet above sea level, right?
The walkout level, yes.
The one that you have that you're currently calling 0, which is not the walkout level, it's I guess the first level here. That's what we're setting the elevation of. And you said that it was 25 feet above sea level, right?
So I'm sorry, that would be plus 10 because we would like to set the walkout level at 25 feet.
Okay, I'm get a little confused. All right, so walkout level is 25. The project 0, which you're happy to maintain as the first level here, is then 10 feet above, so that's 35.
That's correct.
Okay, now I see that there's a 4 3/4 inches as well. So would this be 35, 4 3/4?
That's right.
Okay, so we're going to do 35 feet 4 3/4 inch. Whoops. Now this is it. 35 feet. It's not letting me put in the quote, the foot thing. So because in this particular case, even though it's set for feet, it's insisting that it be in decimal feet. So let me just do an approximation and then we'll come back and fix this. So 4 inches would be a third, 4 3/4 would be, perhaps 0.4. So we'll say 35.4 feet. And we'll get that more exact in a minute. So this, if I were to temporarily change my display under, let's see, it would be under dimensions, work environment, no, project preferences, dimensions, and say temporarily, I would like to look, actually what it would be this elevation here, instead of feet and fractional inches, which is what we're seeing, I'd like to see this as decimal feet temporarily with a couple of decimal places here. Now that didn't actually change the display here. Sometimes there are some dimension settings that are not, connected in different ways. Let me go back here to the dimensions and say, let's see, we have this. Let's just check this one and say, well, let's just say that this is also decimal feet with 2 decimal places. See if that actually changes it. No, this is not. It's not changing the numbers here. So let's go to the story levels. Section settings. In story levels, we have the built-in story marker, the story levels symbol and text here. Okay, that's this one, text style. Here, do we have a choice of how this is going to be, story levels? So, no, God, let me see, whoops. Do we have an element here that is at this level? I'll get this figured out. This element here, which is at the top, is at 10 foot 4 3/4. No, actually, that's just a fill. You don't even have. So let's see let me do, this is sort of a crude way to do it because I'm just getting a little flustered here. And that is, I'm going to draw a line here, which is going to be 35 feet 4 3/4 inches there. And then if I measure this here, okay, so we can see it's 35 4 3/4. If I change my preference to my working units here to decimal feet with a couple of decimal places here, maybe even 3 decimal places here. Now if I measure from here to here, we have 35.396. So very close to 35.4, but 35.396. Now that I've got that, I can go and precisely say that the project location is 35.396 above sea level. That's where the 0 is. I don't need this line anymore here. If we go to our story settings by right-clicking on any floor plan in the view map or the project map, we're seeing these in terms of the, I've changed my preference, my working units currently to this decimal feet. So that's what we're seeing here. The first level is 0, and we know that that's going to be the 35.396 above. Now, let's go to the other place we need to check or set is what's called reference levels. We set the project location saying that the main level, the first level, is at a certain height above sea level. Now let's check our reference levels, and we should see that sea level is minus 35.396 feet below project 0, which is that story. Now, having done this, precisely, we can create a site mesh or adjust the site mesh and be able to pick up elevations in relationship to the stories, like where the first level is. And we can also call out elevations based on sea level for grading plans. So we will now have all of that available. Now, do you have a mesh drawn at all?
Yes, it's in that view there that you're looking at. There's a mesh there.
Okay, so this is a mesh, and we've got points with point elevations, it looks like.
Yes.
Okay, now this point elevation here, so if I just deselect, if I just select this point elevation, it is 21 to 964. It's above what? Let's just see what that says. If I select the actual text here, it's the measured value. We go to custom text here. It's to the project 0 value. So what does that mean? This is 21 feet above your first level, your main level. If we wanted to just sort of test this out and say sea level elevation, so I'm just typing in some text. You can see how it's showing up both in the dialog box and over to the right. And I'm going to now insert in something that says to sea level. And then I'll just hit enter. And now what we'll see is this is 56 feet 6 and 57/64 inches above sea level. Now, of course, I don't have to have all this text here. This is just to demonstrate that if you want to, you can make any one of these the actually we select the text here, any one of these just be the sea level thing. So what would you like these to say?
So I'd like those to be the grade actually above sea level. So it,
So this is
it
what
was
you want.
it was correct at 21.
Oh, okay. So you intended it to be 21 feet above sea level, and it was actually 21 feet above Project Zero.
So yeah, that's the problem. The mesh is not located in the space in the world correctly.
All right.
It,
So let me just undo the the little change that I did to the marker. Let's see. I'm just backing up. It's funny. Every little text thing I'm doing undo, undo, undo. Of course, I can just delete the. All right. So this is now measured value. Okay. So basically this is, instead of being 21 feet above sea level, it's 21 feet above the grade, above the Project Zero. So if we select the mesh and go to a corner point and say, what is the height of this? It says that it's minus 14 feet to the mesh reference plane. Relative to the Project Zero, it's 21 feet. And relative to sea level, it's 56. So that's what this particular one is set. Now, should this be, it looks like you had it 21 feet that you'd set that, and you intended it not to be to Project Zero, you intended it to be to the to sea level, is that right?
that's right.
Okay, all right, so assuming you did the same thing for all the points, which is pretty likely, you were just consistent there, then all we have to do is move this mesh down the appropriate 35 feet, 4 3/4 inches. Right? So let's just see, first of all, before I do that, let's just take a look in 3D and see how this looks. Do we have a 3D view saved? Here's a 3D all. All right, so right now the mesh is obviously way too high because the building is on one level and the mesh is here. So what we need to do is just move this down to 35 feet, 4 3/4 inches. So while I could type in a value here, I'm just going to drag this because it's not 35 feet, it's 35 feet, 4 3/4 inches, right? So I'm going to drag this down. So I just did Command D, and you can see that it's right now it's moving down 21 feet, but I really want this distance, which is purely vertical here. The angle is 0. You can see it's highlighted. The angle says 0, meaning it's going straight down on the axis. So I can say that I want the distance to be 35.396 feet, because right now we're in the what do you call it, decimal ones. So I'll hit enter. So now we have the site approximately where it should be, maybe exactly. Now what I'm noticing is that your blue line, which is the top, that if you didn't modify the mesh, it would just be a flat surface with this as the top. This is set at 35 feet in relationship to sea level here, as opposed to the 35 feet, 0.396. So this is not quite the same level as your walkout, right?
Right. So if we go and we place an elevation marker on the mesh now, will we have the correct distance above sea level?
Yes, actually everything should automatically have just updated because they're live. So if we look at this, actually no, so this is minus 14. All right, so okay,
That's what confused me because I tried to drag the mesh down before and couldn't make it work.
So if I select this and say, hey, I want this to be, instead of to the Project Zero value, I want it to be the sea level value, which is the 21.2 here.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I can do that. Now, of course, you have a whole bunch of points here that you've already put some dimensions on. So it's a little awkward because ArchiCAD doesn't allow you to select all of these terrain elevation dimension points and change their settings in the level dimension tool. But what you can do is you can go and say, I'd like to activate the level dimension tool, select all level dimensions,
Right.
and this will affect all of them. But then I'm going to go and select one of the ones that is one of the text items for that. Now you can see there's 56 items selected, but the last one selected was the text element. And the text element, now we have the option to change this. And guess what? We're going to change it to custom text and get rid of the to PZ value and replace it with to C level value or to alt value. And you can see here's the 20 feet, 21. Of course, this one was 22. So now all of these are doing it to the to alt value, which is the the sea level value.
Super excellent. Super.
Yeah. So we've done essentially, after a little bit of analysis here, we've got the mesh in the right place, and we've got the dimensions referring to the sea level. Now, if you wanted to do this right the first time, the most efficient way, well, what would I do differently? I would, instead of having the blue line of this be at the 35 feet or at the project zero level, I might put this blue line at the sea level, and then you would basically have all of these points raised up. You actually move them down, which of course the intention was it's lower than the project zero, but that meant that I had to go in and manually change the elevation markers, the dimension markers, to like I did. So if you didn't want to do that, then you would set this blue to be, the actual elevation to be at 0, and then have everything go up.
Very good. That's fantastic.
Okay, now let's just take a look at the section. Now in the section, are we probably not seeing the, actually now we're seeing the terrain.
Yes, there's the mesh, yeah, terrain.
Yeah, that's the mesh. Of course, it's, you haven't cut out a hole for the building necessarily.
Right, right.
Okay. All right, so does that resolve the question?
Yes, that was really super. I really appreciate it, Eric. I was kind of banging my head against the wall.
All right, my pleasure. So just know that you should set, so best practices here, at some point early on in your project, you should set your project location, which will have at least the elevation. You can also set latitude and longitude if you want to do sun studies, but at least the elevation. You should also look at the reference levels. Now, the reference level for the sea level will automatically be set when you say you're 35 feet above sea level, then the reference level will have that built in.
Okay.
But you can have other reference levels, perhaps some geodetic survey point or something outside the building, relative to the street or something like that. You can set those up so you can always measure and say, well, how high is this above, the neighboring building or something else. So there's that. So those are the two things. And then you do want to, of course, always look at your story settings and decide what's really the best place to put your project zero. It could be here, it could be at the walkout level. If you don't mind thinking that this is, a negative value, that's fine. But if you wanted it all to be more positive, then you could set this to be the 0 there. Now, by the way, I temporarily have got this in decimal feet. Here, there are two places where this might be adjusted. One is under working units, where I say, hey, now I'm done with working with decimal feet. I'll work with feet and fractional inches because that's what I'm more used to for construction purposes.
Yes.
There. Now, if I go to story settings, we'll see them in the feet and fractional inches. And then the other thing is the dimensions. If I think at one point I changed the active dimensions to a custom setting, decimal feet. As soon as I double click any view, it will activate one of these things. Like this is your company initials, your personal initials.
Yes.
So it would activate that. I can manually go and do this and get it back there. But if I just double click any view, it will pick up that dimension preference.
Okay.
There. All right, so I'm going to just save this. If you want me to send it back, I can.
Yes, please.
All right, so I'll do save as Valentine V11 after coaching here. And then I will, let me just see if there's any follow-up questions from anyone else, because someone may have a thing saying, how'd you do such? Okay, so I see Carl Smith sent a question about saving an entire building as an object. Connor has a question about 3D polylines. Okay. And Brenton has, okay, I'm not sure if Brenton, you're talking about for this library part, lift surfacing. Okay, that I don't think that's related to this project. Okay, so Mackenzie, you have a think that I was on the right track, but maybe I was slightly off. Can you clarify that? So let me open up your line, Mackenzie. Mackenzie, your line is open. You have a microphone? So I'll read off what Mackenzie's comment was. Oh, you don't have a mic. All right. He said, I think you were on the right track. It's the dimension units box, but it was the circle elevation marker, not the triangle elevation marker. Okay, thank you. Let's just take a look at that. So under the project preferences dimensions, and I was looking at this one here, and you're saying it's this dimension type that would have changed it. Now I was looking at the elevation or section view, so I was thinking that it was this one, but I can understand this one perhaps would have been the one that would have changed it in the section. Is that what you're saying, Mackenzie? Yes, okay, with yes with an exclamation mark. Okay, great. Thanks, Mackenzie, for the tip. Yeah, some of these are, well, so, I got confused, all I can say. All right. How do we set the title? Okay, the drawing. Okay, so these are all good, well, additional questions. So Tom, you said elevation is important when sending to Google Earth. Yes, so if you are creating a model of a building and you're going to be saving it out to be viewed in Google Earth or other geodetically oriented modeling environments, you know, basically things that have real world data associated with them, then having the elevation will, you know, make an important difference. So thank you for that point. Okay. And Mackenzie says that's how to make it a decimal. Yeah, so that's what I was, yeah, when we switched it here, that would change it in the section view or the elevation drawing there. Okay, so related question, Vangai says, when there are split levels in a project like this, how can the references be set out to allow for elements to appear at different plan levels? Okay, so there's a multiple levels of answering this question, and not to, you know, not to make a pun about levels, but when we have an element, and let's just take in 3D, take our 3D view. All right, so any element that I select here, this is on a particular story, and right now this says that it's bottom and top in relationship to the project zero is, you know, a certain level. Now the project zero happens to be this story. I don't know if we have, it looks like, if we zoom in, we have a, well, that's an object. Interesting, an object there. Let's zoom in. I thought that would be a, okay, so this is a beam here. I thought we had a slab. Let me just check. All of these are beam objects, but in any event, regardless, here's just a roof. Now, you know, with the roof tool, it can belong to a certain story. It can be visible in 3D. It can be visible in section, and it can be visible on its home story on the plan, possibly story above, possibly all stories, all these variations. Now, the height of this element, where it is in space, we know you have to adjust it to suit your design. It's not locked in to the story level. In the same way, the slabs for a particular part of your building are not locked in to the story level. They can be above or below the story level. So when you have a split level and things are, and you want to keep the raised part and the lowered part in the same story, then all you do is you essentially say, well, this slab is 2 feet above the main reference of that story. So it's not a problem to have them appear, to have the split level information in the 3D model still be on the same story. Now you said, how can the references be set out for elements to appear at different plan levels? So basically, elements like slabs can be, you can say, I want this to show on its home story and 1 story down or 1 story up, or you have different variations. Walls have a little more limited options in terms of showing on the home story or all relevant stories. Basically, if the wall bridges between more than 1 story, you can choose to show it. To answer the question and more precisely, if you sent me a file where you say, I have a problem where I'm not getting my split level to work right, either in the model or on plan, then I could help you resolve that particular problem. But that was a little bit of waving my hands, so to speak, to try to answer that question. So thank you, Vangai, for asking an interesting question. I don't think I gave a complete answer, but now Matt has a question from my coaching group. What is the column you've set up at left just to the right of the main design toolbar? Okay, so this column here is the info box. You may be used to having this info box. It's a palette. Let me just grab it by its title thing. You may be used to having it up at the top of your screen, like this, and you may recognize it here, or actually this is a double width one. So you may be used to the default that Graphisoft provides where the info is across the top. That's perfectly usable, but because it's a thin strip, I actually have to roll my mouse to scroll through it or bring this width down and use the scroll bar to be able to get access to it. So a very efficient way to work with this is to grab the title bar. You can see the little vertical strip here and move this around. Let's see if I can get it. All right, so I've now sort of freed it up. I've undocked it. I can move this anywhere I want. I can change its shape here, you can see. And then if I change the shape to be more vertical like this, of course, I can make it longer. I can put it on another screen. But if I drag my mouse next to the toolbox, you can see how it docks. And when I let go, this is what we had. So that's the info box. And basically, when you have an element selected, of course, it shows information. And before you have an element selected, if I have nothing selected, I'll hit escape, then it shows what you're about to draw, the default settings. So hopefully that answers that question here. All right, so a bunch of other greetings here. All right, so good. We'll move on to some other questions. So going back a ways. So Connor there, okay. Sent a question, Carl Smith. All right, so let's get Carl, your line open. So Carl, your line is open.
Yes. Hi, I was hoping you could show us how to save an entire building as an object.
Okay, we can do that. So I happen to be in this file here. Now, let's see, this file has been fixed after coaching. So I'll just do something here that demonstrates this in this context. I know you said, hey, you can do this on the sample project, and maybe I will later, but let's just look at the plan view here. Zoom out. All right, now, in terms of layers, right now, this is, okay, this is something that will as best practices coach, I'm going to say that this looks suspicious here. What do I mean by that? You have a layer combination for different levels here. And we, in general, will have layer combinations for different types of drawings. And some of the drawings you will have for multiple stories. So for example, an electrical plan, you'll have the same layers for multiple stories, a ceiling plan, etc. So when you have different layer combinations for a level, like the walkout level, that makes me wonder, are you using a different layer combination for that story compared to the first level compared to the second level? Certainly looks like it. And you know, it looks well organized here, but you may be making life a little more difficult for yourself. Now, let's just see, you have all layers on, you have model 3D. All right, I'm going to take the model 3D because that's when we're talking about, for Carl, your question of how do you save a building as an object? I'm going to just say, all right, let's look at the, with these layers, let's say, show me the everything that's visible right now in 3D. And if we do it right, it should look like I expect. Here's a building. We don't have the site. Now, you know, I don't know whether this, you know, what's going on with this wall, and it's, you know, probably the design is not completely modeled in there, but here's a building, okay? How would we save this as an object so you could put it on a site plan if you were doing some site planning, particularly if it was simpler designs or, you know, just the shell as opposed to an entire building? How would you place these around like monopoly houses? And the answer is you go, first of all, you make sure you're looking at just what you want. In other words, I don't want to be saving the site with the building. Second, you go and select everything that you want to save as an object in 3D or on plan. Now on plan, you can get away with having nothing selected and just whatever is visible can be saved. In 3D, you do have to select the stuff. Having selected the stuff, I go to the File menu, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, an Object. So there are many other choices here, but this is going to be a freestanding object that I could drop in this project or in another project if I save the library part. So I'll say save this as an object. Now, given that I'm in 3D, it says since I'm not in a straight-on view, either top or side, it's going to assume that really I want the top view of this as the object's orientation, which is the natural thing in this case. I want to create this as a building and I want to drop it in, and when I see it on plan, I want to see it from the top, and it's going to be in this orientation of what is up and down and X and Y, etc. So that's what this explanation is. I'll say, okay, thank you. So it's going to say, what do you want to call it? And I'll call this, full building as object here. Okay, so I'm going to save this. So right now it's going into the embedded library. I could save this out to a file on, my drive. I could save it later as a file on my drive, but let's just save it inside this project as an embedded object. So it's going to be available in the object tool, the same one you put in plumbing fixtures or chairs or whatever. It's going to exist in this project as a thing that you can select. It's creating a 2D view and it's creating a 3D compilation of all of the elements. When you place this as an object, it should look virtually the same as what this looks like, but you won't be able to select individual windows or slabs, etc. It'll be just one thing. Now, if I wanted this to be simpler, I might turn off some of the elements inside. Maybe I don't need to have the plumbing fixtures, or I don't need to have certain interior fit out to put it on a site. So that's ideally what I want to do. Now, how long did it take? It's not quite done. Seems like it's taking about a minute here. I think it's probably almost done. Well, it's calculating lines. It's doing a bunch of stuff. at some point it'll be done and we'll be able to place it and compare how the object looks with all of these elements. So Carl, any comments or questions while while this is going on?
No, it's very clear. Thank you.
Now, I don't know why it's calculating all these lines. Now, it might be that if I had saved it from the plan, it would have had less work to do, because this actually might be doing an analysis from the top down of the actual 3D. I don't know why it's taking so long, but hopefully not too much.
Eric, if you're in plan view and you want to save it, could you circle it or constrain it in some way by using the heavy marquee
Yes,
tool?
you can. Yes, you
Okay.
can. So by the way, it says it's done, and it's just telling us that anything that's a composite will not keep building material information. What that means is that it'll look much the same, but if you were to try to connect up a wall to one of these walls in this object, it would not understand what was the building material. It would, so there are some limitations to this, but for general visualization, it'll work fine. So I'll say, okay. It's saying that there are going to be some surfaces that have some base values based on whatever they were. You can rename them, and you can say, oh, that's the such and such, that's the exterior accent color, or that's the brick color, or whatever. Otherwise, it'll just have these names, surface one, etc. And you can also change the default if you wanted to have different variations. But for now, I'm just going to simply say, okay, whatever it was, just go ahead and name them surface 1 through X or N. And let's see, hopefully this last part is just a few seconds. Errors occurred during last operation. Don't know what those are. Often this type of warning is really not a problem. So I'm going to assume that there's no real problem here. Let's go and go down to the floor plan. And I've got the object tool here. The object tool, whenever you create a new object, will load in the new object, full building as object. It'll have a layer. Of course, we can put it on whatever layer we want. I'll just leave it on the ArchiCAD layer. And it'll have a basic size, which unless you want to make it a real dollhouse, you just leave the size alone. And when you click, or when I click, it's going to place it. Now, I don't know about the elevation of it in terms of I probably want to be at the lowest story, which maybe I am. But let me just go ahead and click and place it. Now it says elements have been created and or changed their position on currently unseen stories. So maybe when I click there, it is placed on a different story. Let's just say continue. I'm not seeing it here, but let's just see in 3D what we have. So you notice that we have another building. So this one, when I select it, get a spinning beach ball for a little bit while it's thinking about what it needs to make handles on. But it basically it is the same building. Now it looks like I've got it reversed. You can see how the shapes are. If I select it again, we'll see that this flip orientation was just the last object that was put in flipped. So once I have it selected, if I just unflip it, so obviously it's taking a little time. Now, again, a point that I made briefly was that if you're doing it for site visualization, you'd want to turn off whatever interior fit out is not relevant, and that will simplify things. I'm just going to unflip it here, and we'll see it then in the same orientation in just a second. So that's how you save that. Now, this object here exists in this file, and of course I could put in multiple copies because maybe that's what your thing is. I want to create a building types A, B, and C, and I want to arrange them around the site. You could do that. I think it moved over to the side, so I'm just jumping out to fit in window. Now, if you wanted to export that to put it into another file, like a site file, then what you would do, and God, this, I'm surprised this is taking as long as it is, but not sure what all the, why my computer is challenged there. But okay, so now it's oriented the same way. So the, what was I going to say? So if we wanted to export this, you go to the File menu, Library Manager. And in Library Manager, we go into the embedded library, and that, what did I call it? Full building as object, 12 megabytes, not even that big. I can go and say I want to save it out using this, export it. And I can save this anywhere I want, and then I can load it into another file. So that's how that would work. How's that, Carl?
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. So I do see some comments. So Andy says they're not using the coaching call channel on Slack for this. So this is a public webinar, Andy. So I am using the GoToWebinar features because people who are not part of the coaching program don't have that. But I do see where you, where didn't you say hello? There you are. So you've been moving house and office. Yeah, I haven't seen you for a while. So glad you're back. So Ken, what's the difference between saving as an object and a hot, you said hot line, but actually it'd be hot link. So you can save a part of a project like a unit for a condo or an apartment or a hotel. And you can save that, or a stair type. You can save that as a hot link and place it into the same file multiple times. And those elements are actually going to be normal doors, windows, walls, etc. Will show up in schedules, will turn on and off with different layers, layer combinations, etc. So the hot link can have a copy of some information that is updatable, but it's got all the organizational structure in terms of layers and types of elements. And if you run a wall into another wall and one of the walls is part of a hot link, they will clean up to each other. An object is more of a discrete thing. You can't quantify it in the same way. You can't turn on and off layers. It's just a thing. So in the case of wanting to have a site plan where you're doing a bunch of little houses, little designs, obviously much simpler would be easier. In other words, like leave out the interiors and things. But ultimately, just placing them around for visualization works beautifully. But on the other hand, if you're doing working drawings for those, you're having, well, like a unit plan that you're repeating 18 times for unit type A, then that would want to be a hot link because you want to have it possibly be scheduled and definitely connect up, when a wall hits a wall, things like that. So hopefully that is clear for you as well as others. Okay, could an entire building be saved in place as a hot link? Yes, you can. So the other way that you can save either an object or a hot link is that you can be on the plan. So on the plan, now I'm not sure which story, I'm just going to jump up to other stories. I'm just using these shortcut keys to jump up. So now you can see this is, if I can select it. So you can see this is the object, and you can see it's only got the 4 handles. I can't snap to anything in here. I can't clean it up, but it does, it is the object there. Now, if I wanted to save the 3D model as an object or as a hot link, I can do it from the plan. If I didn't have this one, this object here, and in fact, let me just delete this. There. I could go to the file menu, libraries and objects. And actually here, it doesn't let me, I was mistaken. It used to be that you could just say save the current view as an object, but you do have to select things. So I basically either select with the arrow tool like this, here, but this only selects one story. So if I wanted to have a multiple story thing, then I would use the marquee, draw a marquee around all the relevant parts, and make sure it's a thick marquee rather than a thin one. The thick marquee allows me to select and do something with everything that's in this area on any story. And when I go to the file menu, I can then go and say save selection as. Oh, interesting. So no, I take that back. With the marquee, you can't do the save selection as object there. So we'd have to do it from the 3D window to have it as an object. But as a hot link, we can go and say, I'd like to save selection, which is implied by the marquee, save selection as a module. And this would allow me to go and save multiple stories, this, and give it a name, put it somewhere on my computer, and then reference it in. And so you can use the marquee for that. So the marquee allows selective stuff. And of course, you could have a project with multiple things and you just select the stuff in one area as a hot link. All right. So Carl, you writes, good to know. You're welcome. All right, so let's move on to some other questions that have been typed in. So Connor Moriarty says, what's the best way to import 3D polylines from AutoCAD? They are survey lines for the base of a rubble stone wall and the top of the wall. The wall is not a straight line in plan and the top of the wall is uneven. So let me open up Connor's line. Connor. Hey, Connor, your line is open.
Hi, Eric. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. So when we're talking about importing something from AutoCAD, there are real limitations to what you can do. You can place DWG as a 2D drawing onto any view. A plan view would be typical, or a worksheet. And then you can trace it. You can build things on top of it. You can use it as a reference information. Now, if you have something that's modeled in 3D in AutoCAD, you can, instead of placing it as a drawing, you can go to the File menu, Libraries and Objects, and say you want to open an object. And when you do that, you can choose, hey, I'd like to select this DWG file. Now, it will bring in something in 3D, but it may or may not be satisfying in terms of, what, is it solid or is it just lines? I've had people say the surveyor has created a whole contour map and he says it's all in 3D in AutoCAD, and we've brought it in, and yes, we've gotten 3D lines floating around in space, but we don't have a surface, so you can't really, see a building in context of that, because you're just seeing these floating, sort of abstract lines in space, and you can't trace them, unfortunately. You can't snap to them. So bringing in something from AutoCAD as a 3D object is somewhat limited. I mean, in the old days, we might bring in something like a manufacturer's object that way. Nowadays, it's more common to bring it in from either SketchUp or Revit as 3D objects, which generally visualize quite well compared to the AutoCAD. So this thing about survey lines for the base of a rubble stone wall, and they're, you're saying that they have not a straight line and plan, and the top of the wall is uneven. You could try saying open object and saying that you'd like to open library part from browse for file. So that allows you to go search for something. And when you're doing that, you can select that you want to bring in a DWG file. And you could see what happens when you bring in that file with the 3D polylines. no guarantees from my side that this
Yeah.
will give you what you want, but you may be able to visualize it. You may be able to place it and sort of move around and actually see some lines in space. And even if you can't necessarily trace it, you can reference it. One other thing, if you can't trace it, but it is in the right space, you might possibly be able to convert it to a morph. So after you bring it in, if it's floating around and you just have these lines that you can't snap to, you might be able to select it and say under the design menu, convert to morph. And then the morph might actually have lines that you can snap to. So
Okay.
that's what I would attempt to do.
Fingers crossed I'll try that. So
Yeah, so play around with it, but I would bring in file, libraries and objects, open object, select it, see whether it actually is in 3D when you bring it in, and then you convert it to a morph if it works.
that's perfect. Thanks, Eric.
Okay, Connor. So let me move on then. A lot of greetings to Saxon. Hey, nice to see you. So Brenton, badly put, so your clarification on something. I'm not sure what you had sent in. So let me just open up your line, and maybe you sent in an email and I'm not sure. So Brenton. And I do have some emails. I want to go and check what emails were sent in, but Brenton, your line is open. Okay, Brenton.
Okay, I'm there now. Greetings,
Okay.
How are you?
Excellent, good. Where are you calling in from?
Good to Melbourne, Australia.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So you said, is there an adjustability of the lift landing level to associated floor heights for this library part? So did you send in something earlier?
No, I didn't actually. I was keeping it straightforward. It was just I'm on version 23 at the moment, and just been having difficulty with just the elevator 23 library part. And I've got a building where I've got 2 lifts, but I've set only one set of levels for the building, and a different part of the building is a different level. So of course, when you bring the library part in, it tries to adjust for the levels that you've set. So I'm trying to basically set one of the lifts with independent of the level set for the model.
Okay. I don't use the elevators much, so I'll just have to open it up. I'm starting up 23 international version, so
Okay.
I might have the library might match the part. So I'm not trying to look at something that possibly has been changed in 24 or is different in the US version. So let's see, here's 23
Okay.
coming up. So it is referring to heights in relationship to the stories. Is that?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it looks like there's some, you can basically pick on some pull down components, like we hover the library part of things, and I've tried dragging various parts of the model down, but it doesn't seem to work. So there's obviously points in the model that you must be able to drag down. It says you can, but I can't do it.
Okay. Let me just take a look.
I could attempt a model, but this project's pretty large, so it would have probably been too long to download.
It's better to look in isolation, particularly if it's a feature related to a thing like a library part. And what I'm going to do, actually, just to free up some memory, what I'm going to quit out of this ArchiCAD. So I'd already saved it after the coaching changes, and I will send that to, that's Will, I think. So I'm not going to save this where I had created the whole building as an object, because that obviously isn't relevant there. All right, so we're in the 23 file. We're going to the object tool. And so you refer to it as a lift. Let's see if it.
No, it's an elevator.
All right, so.
I think it's their elevator 23 or 20. Yeah, I think that's what it's called, the library part.
All right, elevator 23. All right.
That's it.
Got that. All right, so there's settings that relate to how it's going to show up on the plan. Like, is it going to show the doors or
Yeah,
the
you
opening.
you can turn the shaft on. You can do whatever.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So and this is just a single story right now. So if we go here, where are we going to say car position is on a particular story, car height, this would be an offset relative to that story. And what about the car?
If you just click on, that's right.
Story settings. Okay. So and there's split level stories, a number of stories above home stories. So let's say 2 stories there. And that, is it not actually going to?
I think you can actually set, you can, here I am trying to click on your screen.
Yeah, so I'm not sure why this is, I would have expected that as soon as I did this, it would go up, but maybe I have to, no, the height is, why is it not?
Just click on, if you click on the box, I think there are some general settings where you set the number of floors. Just click on there and then it goes, general settings, then you just, is it there or is it the next one down? There's one where you just set the number of floors. It's how many floors above and below and whatever.
Okay, so here's show elevator shaft. So now,
shaft, that's right.
All right, so that was important. So if I'm in the story settings.
Settings, that could be it there.
So if I were to say it's just 1 story up, then it's going to be.
If you put in,
Okay, all right, so we've got some basic controls. So what is the problem that you're experiencing?
So basically what it is if you drop that straight into your model, it'll set the lift doors, the entry points actually at the floor levels you've got set in your model. So
all right, so let me just put in a slab here.
Yeah, put a couple of slabs.
Okay, so we're going to do a split level sort of thing, right? All right, so let's just say that this slab is higher, its base is up at, well, what are we at? 2 meters above or something like that. There. Okay, so if I go to 3 here, so I have, this is raised up. Here's our elevator. So let's just put let's put this, a copy of this elevator there. We'll go to 3D and say, in this split level thing, I want it to be up higher because, you know, it's oriented towards a different part of the building. So can I go and drag this up? So drag this up and snap it. Yeah.
So what the question is, can you take the individual lift door and just drag that up? Like, just say you had 2 or 3 floors set up and they're 3, I'm going to go meters. They're 3 meters apart. And so, but then one part of the building, they're 3.5 meters apart.
Okay. So what is this snap here? This is
just looking at that. I hadn't seen that before. Can you just drag that? Can you?
Yeah. Well, let's rotate this around where I've got an angle where I have more controls. So select this. So press down on it. It has, okay, so right now I would be moving the whole thing, but if I go to move,
so that one there, right?
then this is offset or so
yeah, that's doing it.
So just hit enter, and yeah, so you can.
Oh, there you go. Okay, well there you go. We both learned something. Thank you.
Yeah. So apparently that is something you can set in a 3D view. I imagine you can do it in an elevation view or section view. I'm not sure if there's some, if we select this, is there some setting where it would be set shaft door style, name of story to be edited here. Okay, height of edited story. So here's the next story up, and height of this.
See, that's the other thing. It always seems to sort of stay like you can't fill it in. That's what I initially tried to do. I thought, oh, maybe you can just do it per.
All right, so let's just say this is 3,000 on 1 story up, and let's just see if it's different than this one, which.
Sorry about that.
So if I go to go up to 1 story up, now it still says 3,000. So it's not actually. It's not showing it, and
Interesting.
So, you know, if I had to guess, I would say that the library part does allow this, but it doesn't allow it as an editable thing in your,
Okay.
you know, in the library part settings. So it's functional, but it's a little bit funky in terms of, you know, you can't just go in necessarily and say, well, on this story, I need it to be this offset. But fortunately, you can, you know, select it. And for each individual story, there's a little magenta hotspot.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. I think maybe it was a bit different. This model's, I think I may have started using this with version 22 or even 21. So that library part wasn't adjustable like that. So it is apparently now you can. That's great.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, good.
Thanks so much.
I'm glad I was
Stay
able
well.
to zoom in on it relatively quickly. So.
All good. Stay
Yeah.
well.
Let's see. Okay, so I see a comment from Jay about the info box on the left. Also move certain items in the toolbox up so there's less scrolling. Yeah, so you can adjust that. So that's a good point. So Jay, let me open up your line. Been a while since we've talked. I'm glad to see you on the call. So Jay, your line is open.
Yeah, hi there.
Hey, so you said that you like to have less scrolling. So I'll tell you one, or you know, share with everybody one that I like. So here's our ID. So if you were to be, let's say, wanting to work on the IDs of doors and windows, depending upon the size of your screen, you know, this may be off screen down below. This is actually more of an issue when it's horizontal because it'll be to the very far right and off screen. And what you were pointing out, and I'll just do this quickly, and then you can tell me what other examples you do, is if we go to our work environment to the info box, which is this thing here, I can say for the window tool, I would like the ID and properties to be up near the top here. And then of course I can do that for the door tool. I can do that for whatever other tools I want. So now I'll just say this and you'll see that now with the window tool, the ID is up at the top. So if you find, and I think with walls, there's actually, you can see there's some stuff down here. The ID is actually off screen, you know, for this particular size screen. And so if that ID was important for walls, then you could just move that up there. So is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, and ID is probably the key one for a lot of things because I use it for labeling a little bit. But the thing that on the left, when the toolbar's docked on the left, one thing I noticed on my screen, and I'm trying to see the resolution of your screen right now. So you have, when you have that on the left, look at the very, very lowest part of the viewable area, and all those little hard, not to the right, a little bit. They're hard coded, like the zoom and all those are not something I found to adjust. And see how yours on the far right has, is that the category or what's?
Yeah, so if you're, depending upon how far you have, we may reveal.
Right, my because my resolution is set a certain way. I only get to pen sets, and I didn't know that till I saw someone working. I'm like, wow, there's all this other stuff to the right that I could on the fly click, like some of the things like model view options, you know,
Yeah.
our graphic override.
Graphic overrides or model view options, yeah.
Those would be great to kind of click on the fly and switch while I'm doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But because my resolution isn't set as tight as yours, and maybe I should change it, I never knew there were all those menus over there, and they aren't tools or bars that I've been able to move. Now, if I move my toolbar, my info box, or whatever you call it, out of the way and put it where they like it, or just dock it in the center of the screen, I'm able to see the model view options and the graphic override combinations, and then there might be something further to the right.
So
looks like it.
Here would be a variation where I might have it down and get most of this here, but I'm not docking it. So it allows this to tuck underneath here.
Right.
As
That's a
soon
good
as I
option.
dock this, you'll see all of this stuff move over to the side. So as soon as I move my mouse over to where it docks, it does take precedence over that. You can see how it's, slides these over. Yeah, so that is, it's a little less flexible than I'd want, but certainly you have a lot of options.
Well, with the resolution you have, you can see all your, I wish that lower bar
Mhm.
was editable, because I don't use this, maybe others do, but I don't use the zoom features ever down there,
Mhm.
or really even the scale feature ever down there. Probably could. Probably the minute I get rid of it, I'll be like, wow, that'd be fun to have. There's so many buttons, right? And you
Yeah.
get good at using your own mouse or using whatever. I wish you could drag that. I don't mind them being kind of hidden, but I wish I could kind of scooch it left and right, like you would tabs on a spreadsheet, lower
Mhm.
spreadsheet. You don't see all the tabs, but there's tabs over to the left maybe, or tabs over to the right of a different
Yeah,
part of the
I,
book.
I agree that this part of the interface is, a little limited and not as flexible. So anyway, appreciate your sharing just the optimization here, in terms of just say going in and changing where certain things are. If you do that, for those of you who are not so familiar and you want to try that, again, that is under the options menu, work environment, and I'm in the international version, so this is a the options menu is slightly different because element attributes are in a flyout menu as opposed to under the main one. But under work environment, you go down to info box and you can customize what's there. And once you've got this info box, let's say working the way you wanted, you can go to the tool schemes and you can store it. Right now you can see it says custom because I've modified things, but you can store it and say this is Eric's toolbar, or something like that. So
One thing I noticed when I moved from version to version, or second version to second version or whatever, is I like to, of course, do my own work environment, and I have them all on a cheat sheet somewhere. I like to start with their basic work environment and kind of tweak it from there. And this is where I usually go in from their basic work environment, and then go in and modify. I don't carry my work environment forward because the menus and everything change sometimes, and all those things you might lose. So do you know if you can bring this info bar saved from your old work environment in as just, and rename it as 24 or 20, whatever? I manually do it each time.
I think so. Let me just make a general comment. What you're doing in terms of starting with Graphisoft Standard for a new version like ArchiCAD 24, and then customizing it from there, that's a good idea, because while you can carry across your work environment from a previous, your last installation of ArchiCAD into it, and it asks you, do you want to, you may very well miss out on some new menu items that they've added or other changes in the environment that, it's basically they don't show up if you migrate things. So I would always start out with their preferred menus and tools and things and work environment, and then customize. Now, can you bring in selective stuff? Well, since I can take this custom one, let me just store it as Eric here, or Eric's tool scheme here. All right, so now I've got a name here. I can export this and I can save this somewhere, and then later I can import, and you can import it into another computer you have, like a laptop versus a desktop, be a colleague or a staff member's one, so you have standard environment that you are making sure everybody in the office uses. Now C, can you bring it into a later version of ArchiCAD? Probably, but it's worth testing, and I haven't really looked at it for a long time, how well that works. This is for a particular set of preferences under the toolbox, tool settings, and info box. You also have the option under the work environment profiles to, once you've got one in place, you can export it. And then that would bring in virtually all of these things.
Right.
So
knowing that the toolbox, if you brought yours from before morphs were created or whatever, you wouldn't have the morph toolbox if you just did your whole tool scheme. So yeah, it's always good to kind of use their tool schemes. So I guess when you change the info boxes like I've done, you asked me which ones I like to do, I kind of went panic. It's like, I probably don't know. I probably should have written down which ones, because I always have to go back and go, why is that not there? Oh yeah, I haven't changed it in the work environment this year or whatever. It's good to write them down.
I'll give you one example here. I believe if I go to work environment here, in ArchiCAD 24, Graphisoft includes the MEP modeler that was previously a paid add-on. So what is MEP? The modeler allows you to model ductwork, piping, and electrical cable runs in 3D and do some reporting on it. A pretty good toolkit. It's been around for years and years and probably has had some enhancements here and there. But now it's included. And so if you want to visualize your ductwork, if you want to coordinate it, if you want to propose to your consultant, here's where I think we should have a run, or here's what I'm thinking, and the consultant can say, oh, you'll need a wider duct for this area because of the volume that it has to carry. Anyway, you can do that, but you wouldn't have the tools and the other things available if you had migrated your work environment from 23. And so here and there, you don't necessarily know what you don't know. Just like you said, Jay, that you didn't even know that down at the bottom there were these other pop-ups. So
that MEP question, I don't know if you noticed with objects that you previously saved as objects that are now considered, what do they call them, MEP, now
they become equipment.
They get lost, then you can't, then they're kind of lost, not favorites, but they're, when you search for them in objects, are no longer objects. It got a little confusing, and I know it's a whole topic probably on why they did that, and it's kind of clunky right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's always transition bumps where you go, I don't understand what they did or why they did it. And of course, if someone like me or someone else explains, well, here's what you need to know, then okay, not a big deal. You just need to use the equipment tool, to do certain things, or understand when you're in certain modes, what gets locked and what doesn't.
So did you change all your favorites then for your templates and stuff were associated to that?
Okay, well, favorites is a large topic in terms of migration. So the short answer is you can import favorites from previous versions of ArchiCAD. You can migrate, a template from 23 to 24 with favorites. But as you load in a new library, the 24 library instead of 23, some of those favorites may become inactive or grayed out because those library parts that they're referring to no longer are accessible. And so there is some manual work that you have to do if you want to retain the usability of the favorites palette, and all the work you put in as you go into a new version. So that is a trade-off. Yeah, you get a new library and it has some new things, but your favorites may have to be reworked. When I update master template every year, I always have to go through the process of updating the interactive legends, the kit of parts, to use the new library and the favorites. So
it's a gray area now, because when you see them as the favorites, but once you place them as an object, when you go back to them, they're no longer an object. They're the other thing, but they still do place from the favorites as objects, even though they're now those other things. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, thanks for having a little interesting discussion there. So let's see, Buzz Brian. Hey, Buzz, it's been a while. You ask, is dark screen mode available for Windows? I don't know. I'm on a Mac. I think dark screen or the dark mode is something that Apple introduced, if I'm not that's my impression. And so it's sort of a feature on Mac, and Graphisoft felt like, well, we need to support that. So there is the dark mode. I don't know whether there is an equivalent on Windows. My guess is no. If you're asking about it, then it probably doesn't exist. If somebody else has information about it, please just type in. And I never use it, but it just basically has a dark background, and your I guess your menu choices, all your icons become then light. So Alexis asks, is this a good way for exporting AC drawings to Twinmotion? So Twinmotion is something that I've used a little bit here and there, and I helped produce a course by Peter Toohey on Twinmotion, but frankly, I have not really used it. I believe with Twinmotion, whatever you have, you just go and say, I'd like to use the direct link. If you have a model set up, and you basically just say, I want this model with these layers that are currently visible to open up in a Twinmotion file, or to update the Twinmotion file that's currently open. So I don't know that you can use a marquee or not. I know you can definitely control it with layers. Okay. So Jay Shoemaker saying hello, retired but enjoy keeping up. Okay, and thank you for the good wishes for my health. I appreciate that. And all the rest of you, thank you. I mean, I've gotten a lot of comments on my YouTube videos. I've gotten a lot of comments on my blog post about my health challenges, and just a lot of emails. So I want to thank you all for giving me that support. It definitely helps me feel motivated to just keep going. I really do love working with all of you. So makes it all worth it. All right, so Tom Palmer says, how to create a simple 2D object that I can change the shape, say square, circle, triangle, with editable text in its center. That's a pretty complicated thing. You're a simple 2D object, but it actually, that would require a lot of scripting to do that. I can say conceptually it's not hard, but in terms of demonstrating that, it would take a while. It would take a whole lesson, an hour or more to lay out a sequence. But I'll tell you, if you want to get into this sort of thing, there's a course that I produced a few years ago with Gary Laws called Practical Parametric GDL. It is still available for sale through the Masters of ArchiCAD training series, and it will teach you how to do exactly what you're asking, which is to be able to do basic scripting that allows you to choose options. In other words, like you have square, circle, triangle, or this chair versus that chair versus the third chair, or different options. It allows you to, or will teach you how to put in parameters that you can use to selectively change the size or shape or length of a wire. You have a hanging lamp, and the lamp is something you imported, but you want to have it associated with a wire that goes up to the ceiling. How long is that? You want that to be parametric, perhaps. So those are the sort of things you can do, and putting in some text, like you said, that's editable. Again, so that would be, of course, if you're interested in that, Tom, just send me an email, support@bobrow.com. I'll point you to where that course is, and we can get you going. Okay, so Mark Hess, it's been a long time since we've talked. You put your model view options, graphic override combinations, and Reno over and under the navigator. Over and under the navigator. So can you actually get this navigator so that it docks? Let me open up your line here if you're still on, Mark. Hey, Mark. Your line is open. I'm not hearing you, unfortunately. So this is the navigator palette. Let's see here. So when we have the navigator palette not showing down here, then this extends. Now I'm just wondering if I move this to the side, you can see the gray area is extending down all the way there. And I don't know if there's a way to dock it so that it doesn't do that. It seems to do that. So of course I could just stretch this down so it's not docked, and then this has more space. So that's an interesting approach. So it's not docked, but that's really not a big issue. So Mark, last call in terms of your microphone. Oh, it says, oh, there's another, oh, all right, Mark, it looked like you.
There we go. Can you hear me
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, okay, so
Okay.
it looks like you went offline on one, maybe you logged in a second time to.
It was an audio permissions thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, hey, it's been a while. Are you still working at the hospital?
Yep, still am.
All right, awesome. Well,
So,
I just had
what
an
I did is-
experience at a hospital, as you know.
Yes, it's glad to see you back.
So what I did where I undocked the navigator, is that what you're doing, or have you figured out another way?
It actually was something I saw on a web page. Somebody was showing, I think it was on some web screen or YouTube video or something. And what they did is they were able to stack the MWOs and all those bottom menus. They were able to stack them. And so with a little bit of trial and error, I got it to dock underneath the navigator. So they kind of stack up. And then I put the renovation filter on top of it. And it's really nice and handy because I get to see all those settings stacked on the right, and the navigator doesn't go all the way down. It's like probably about 2/3
All right, I'm going to
down.
move this out of the way. So if I take the renovation and I put it here, that's still, of course, now it's taking the whole side, and so I'm not sure that's how you
try putting the navigator above it.
Okay,
Anyway, I could send you I could email you a screenshot or something.
Yeah, so these won't dock to each other when they're freestanding, and when I have this off to the side, it's just.
I have to tell you, it took me a few minutes to get it to work, but it did finally click and hold. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know what seems to be doing that, but clearly, at least one workaround for this is to not have it docked. Just place it where you want it, and place this, where you want it, and then you do have it wrapped there. So that's usable, but it's not got the snapping into place, at least for me. All right. So thanks for joining, and nice to reconnect with you.
Same here.
So I'm looking at some other comments here. So Tom says, always recommend to redo for each version. I guess that would be the work environment. New features are available for each ArchiCAD version, and all new items show up in blue in the list of commands, etc. Okay. So in terms of show up in blue, don't know we don't see commands show up in blue here, but I guess under the options work environment, there may be, like under keyboard shortcuts here, I go to all commands in alphabetical order. Here, if we're looking at that, yeah, here we see about Twinmotion Direct Link 2020 and 3ds to GDL conversion options. So these are new commands that didn't exist. And there's bending, for ductwork and cable carrier. So these are new commands. So I get that's at least what I've seen for blue. So I think that's probably what you're referring to there. All right. Glenn Berger says, I'm using a 2019 iMac and having crashing problems, or other people having similar issues. I'll ask if any of you are using an iMac, or if you're having crashing problems just in general, maybe post a note just here and we can compare them. Okay. And Steve Pribble, thanks for your greetings for my health. So many of you. Okay. All right. Chris Iliff, I recently tried to open a file made in version 14, sent to me. I used version 22 and having trouble finding the materials used in that version. Is there a way I can add materials in Attribute Manager? Okay, let's open up your line, Chris, if we can. So Chris, your line's open? So not hearing you, Chris, there.
Sorry, I was muted.
All right, I can hear you. All right, so you're bringing something in from version 14 into a later version, 22. It's
Yes.
missing some resources. So let's just talk a little bit about resources like materials. So it used to be that what the surface of something looked like was called its material. And you had native materials, like it's made of concrete, so it looks like concrete. And you had materials that you would override, and you'd say, I want it painted white or green or something like that. In ArchiCAD 17, we introduced building materials, saying what is it actually made of, not what does it look like when we cut through it in a section, but what is it made of? And then building materials have thermal attributes. You know, you could potentially do analysis of heat loss, insulation, and things like that. And they do have a native, what does it look like when you cut through it in section? And it has a native appearance of a surface, so we now call them surfaces. So the old materials in version 16 and earlier are now surfaces. And if you have something that you brought in from 14 and it's missing those materials, then what's essentially is you're missing the support for those surfaces now that you open it in 22. Now, what supports a surface? How does ArchiCAD know how to represent a surface? So if I go to the options menu, surfaces, or if you're in international version, options, element attributes, flyout menu, surfaces. When you open that up, the main thing that helps you to visualize the surface is the texture. The texture is a file that lives in your library and gives it, you know, an appearance different than just a flat color. So if you're missing this, and in fact, if you open it up and you see the purple checkerboard, that would indicate that it's missing that surface. It may also then say missing up here, so it might have the name and then it might say missing here. Now we can go and browse and say, hey, I want to fill in something that's missing, or I want to replace this generic exterior with a different look. You know, so this is, if I widen this here, you know, maybe I want it to be a darker one, or whoa, that's trowel made white. Wow, what is that? Okay, so here's the surface. So I could say the generic exterior is going to have this surface. I'll say okay, and you'll see how that changed. Now we can go one at a time for these. This has a name, and if this name is not found in the library, it'll show as missing. Instead of replacing them, you know, saying one by one, here's what I want to use, you could load into the Library Manager different different textures. So under Library Manager, we have, what are we loading? Well, we're loading the standard library, in this case, the MEP library, and whatever is in the embedded library also gets loaded. What's in the embedded library? Nothing, because this is a blank file from the standard template. But you can go and add in a folder and, or actually import a folder. Let's see, import a folder from somewhere on your computer. Now, if I go to something like my ArchiCAD area and jump back to Graphisoft, I may find that I actually go back to ArchiCAD 14 here, and I could load in the, what do you call it? Where is it? Why am I not seeing? Oh, here's ArchiCAD Library 14 International and ArchiCAD Library 14. Okay, so I could load that whole library from before, and it would have all of the textures and surfaces, for those materials or surfaces. So you could add that in. You will get a bunch of duplicates. You'll get reports that certain things are duplicated. You could live with that. It's not generally a problem, but that is something you might want to avoid. One way to avoid that is to, instead of loading the old version of ArchiCAD entire library, is you go under libraries and projects and say, I want to add in support for earlier, what do you call it? So I'm in version, I think this is 24 that I'm sitting in. Can't remember. No, this is, yeah, I'm not sure if I think I'm in US 2024 here. In any event, I can go into the, ArchiCAD 24. I can go in and load the migration library. So the migration library, if I load this, it's going to support all of the versions of ArchiCAD from, I think, 12 or 13 on up, including the surfaces that were built in, or the materials that were built into those. So that would be generally the fastest way to do it. Now, if you find that when you do this, let's say reload and apply, say what happens. This migration library should not have any duplicates with the current library, because it's been set up by Graphisoft to be used in conjunction with that, so you don't get duplicates. But all it has is the standard parts. In other words, the things that Graphisoft sent. And if you find that there's still some things missing, then maybe they were custom textures that were used in the earlier project, or your office standards, in which case you would want to use the add button and load in a folder with those textures. So those are going to be image files that represent the materials, or what we now call surfaces. Is that relatively clear?
Yeah, I asked the firm that sent me the file, and they said it was a standard, I think they said international version. So I thought, okay, I'll just go and find the library. But I haven't found anywhere to download that standard library. I'm only down to the oldest one I've got is 16 on my machine, and I tried loading that library, and I still had probably half the surfaces missing. So I'm kind of beginning to think you're right. Maybe they're not right about standard version. I think maybe there's a few custom items in there.
Well, I would first of all test the migration libraries, because that goes back literally to version 12 or 13 and on up. So it should include that. Now, of course, if you're using a mixture of US and international, maybe there's some other things that you have to look at. If you really get stuck, we can arrange a little consulting session. I can take a look, and I have access to, well, a lot of different ArchiCAD support files, and I can probably help you.
Sure. Thanks a lot. That's good.
You're welcome. All right. So Jeff Griffin wrote 2020 iMac here, fully updated OS and ArchiCAD 24. I have occasional crashes as well. So occasional is, I guess, different than what Glenn Berger was saying. I'm having crashing problems. So, if it's occasional and it's like once a week, or, I can't remember the last time, but it happened this year, that's one thing. If you're having it crash several times a day, that's a whole other thing. So I don't know. I have been having crashes where I leave ArchiCAD open and come back later and it's crashed. So obviously not doing anything, but the computer is running, and I don't know, but I have had that a fair amount of times. And it's like, whoa, what, and of course I always make it a habit that if I'm working on something real, I always save before I walk away. So usually it's not a big deal, but it is a little annoying. And Jeff says, glad that ArchiCAD 24 has a robust file safety when crashes occur. That's true. Brenton says, some problems I understood with macOS Big Sur version 11.4. Also possibly issues with the M1 MacBooks. Okay, and Graphisoft is not up to spec on that yet. So yeah, I actually have stayed with Catalina instead of Big Sur. So that is a difference for me. I bought this laptop a year ago in March, I think, last year. So obviously the Mac OS changed in October, give or take, and I still haven't changed over. At some point, I'll definitely upgrade. All right, now Mark says, okay, email to you. What did you email me, Mark? So Mark.
Oh, I emailed the little menu
the link
thing.
Okay, cool. All right, now we did have some things that were sent in by email, and I'm not sure if these people are on the call. Since I did ask at the beginning, if you sent in something, let me know in the chat. Oh, by the way, Ken Brooks says 27-inch iMac, no crashing issues. Okay. And you did have a question, Ken, earlier related to the hotlink. Does the hotlink have the characteristic of being able to update as things change? Yeah, that's one of its real benefits, is that as you update your design or add more to it, you resave the hotlink and then you update the hotlink in the one or many instances that it's being seen in, and that keeps it up to date. So it's not instant, but it's definitely straightforward process and not prone to error, because it's not like a partial update. It's either it's out of date or it's updated. So so I'm just looking at these things. So was Andrej? Did Andrej show up here? Don't see him. Chris Jackson, are you on the call? No. Okay. Francois, what are Francois on? No, from South Africa. It's getting pretty late there. Steve Lacello. Nope. Okay, Chris Pooley. I've been answering by email. Don't see you. Kaihaku Chun. I think he's from China, so I don't know what time it would be there. Barog, he's asking for a free copy of my training because he's a student. Shadows, Nestor. Is Nestor on? See, there are all these ones that I could answer, but oh, there, Nestor, you are on. Okay, so I'm opening up your line, Nestor.
Yeah, I'm here. Glad to see you, Eric, back.
Nice to see you. So you said when you print your drawings, you notice that the shading or shadows appear to be rough on site plan and exterior elevations compared to the shading produced by the zone tool, which is smooth, open attached drawings. So these are JPEG. So this is, let's just see what this, okay, let me see if I can get this any bigger. All right, so saying that, let's compare this to the other one. All right, so you're saying, like, are you talking about the texture?
Yeah.
Okay, so the texture that you see in an elevation is controlled by the elevation setting. So let me just draw a simple little building shape here and go to roof tool and say take the roof tool to the current, well, let's take it up to the next story, make sure it's going to show on all stories. And I think this, that, come on now. Okay, so now if I go to 3D, you'll see that I've got something at least reasonable? Okay, so here we've got, of course, shadow there. And if I go to our elevation, okay, so currently the elevation is not showing a shadow. If I open up the elevation settings and change the model display, so this is the way I'm looking at the model. Am I going to show sun shadows? Yes. All right, as soon as I do that, here's shadow polygons. This is what you want to pay attention to. So 25%, these are smooth shading, but you can also have other things. So let's just see what it is with smooth shading. 25% of whatever, this is a sort of a dark gray, and we'll say okay. So you can see this is as smooth as, you know, you could hope. But let's look at what it could be, and maybe what you have there is, instead of it being 25% or one of these solid fills, you might have, you know, some diagonals. Just that would be one example. Okay, so from a distance, it looks like a shadow, but of course it is line work. Let's look at other ones that could be set. You know, it could be, you know, some sort of a grid thing like this. That's rather odd, but anyway, you get the point that that if it's not a smooth thing, then you're basically choosing something for the shadows other than solid fills. All of the ones that say solid fills are percentages. Even if they say tile or whatever, anything that's a vectorial fill is going to be, you know, something, you know, different. Let's see, here's insulation rigid here. Yeah, so from a distance, may not look too bad. And in fact, in the old days, you know, this was the only way that you could do it on a pen plotter, you know, is have hatching. So does that make sense?
I use a solid fill too, and 25%. But I wonder why when I print, yeah, I get those results, right? Compared to the one that produced by Zone, you know, shading, it's so much smoother than the one that's produced by shadows, even fills too. I get rough.
Okay. I'm not sure. I mean, basically, as far as I know, you know, that would control the visibility here. When you place this onto, you know, so if we go back to your submission here, you're on a sheet. So these are drawings on a sheet. So I'm looking at just one drawing, but if we were to look at a drawing on a sheet, is there any control for that? So let me get this back to percent here. 25% here. Okay, and now on a sheet, it might be on this default place where these elevations are showing. So all right, so here's the one that I modified the south elevation. I'll just zoom in on it. I wouldn't expect there to be any issue. You know, obviously it's a smooth thing. If I select the drawing, let's see if there's any options within the drawing that might affect this. So we have pen sets and colors, but I don't think that's going to affect it. Don't see any other options here that would relate to the content of it. Now here it's on-screen preview. You know, there is this, that, you know, if you had a very complicated thing, it might possibly, you know, be useful. It's quick preview, but I mean, it's obviously no detail here anyway. So I don't know. I'd have to see the file. So if you wanted to send me a file, I could open it up.
It's smooth when I look at the layout, but the only problem when it's printed, it becomes raw. But everything on my computer, they look good. Only when after you print, that's the
I know
problem.
you're printing to PDF.
Yeah, PDF.
Okay. I don't know. So if you were to send me the file, I could at least test it out.
Yeah, I will. I will. Thanks, Eric. Thanks a lot.
So let's see, going back to, all right, so we discussed it. I don't have an answer, but discussed a few things here. So that was Nestor. There, okay, so it's going down here. I do seem to have access to that. Okay, here's Carl. Okay, Carl, I think I did. Yeah, so this, we went earlier. So Steve had a question to view a file. I don't know if Steve's on the call. You are, Steve, so we could look at that, but I know we're going to have our regular coaching call. So this is the end of 2 hours of the ArchiCAD user monthly webinar. Perhaps it's a good point to make a transition so we can finish up this for those of you who just wanted to come in and see that I'm alive and well, learn a few things, and reconnect. I'm glad you joined us. If you are interested in going deeper with ArchiCAD, if you want to get a comprehensive set of training lessons, if you want to be part of my coaching program where I will work every week to help answer these questions, then you can drop me a line at support@bobrow.com. We can arrange a time to chat, or I can answer questions about that. My main offer, my main training is at archicadtraining.com, pretty easy to remember, and it's a very comprehensive training course, and it's my pleasure to help ArchiCAD users around the world with mastering the software. So any final comments, please share them. If you enjoyed this, if you felt like it was good use of your time, I always appreciate hearing that. If you want to tell friends and colleagues about it, please do. I will want to go back to interviewing successful users. So those of you who are on right now, we've got 64 people on. If you or someone you know would be a good candidate where you have some interesting work to share, you don't have to be a world-renowned expert. And in fact, it's interesting just to have, good workmanlike ArchiCAD projects where you've, let's say, struggled to get up to a certain level of mastery, and you're now saying, looking pretty good, I like what I've got. Then we can talk about the learning process that you had. We can look at your projects, and we all learn when we open up, someone's project that's had a lot of care put into it. So please let me know, just drop a line to support@bobrow.com, and we can schedule a time for you or someone that you like and respect to share the podium and show us your projects. So I see some comments here. So question, Doug Muir, is a hot link different than a module? It's the formal term is a hot linked module. So a hot linked module is what we were talking about earlier. It's something that's referenced into the project and updatable. Now you can also have a module that is not hot linked, that you're essentially copying and pasting the contents of the module into the project. So you can merge a module in and now it's no longer linked, or you can place a hot linked module which is linked to the external file. All right, Connor saying good night. It's very late in Ireland. Stuart Blake says it can be the PDF settings. This affects the shading of percentage fills. Okay, Stuart, that's a good point. We can just see in terms of PDF settings if there's something. So if I go to the file menu and I say save as, one of the options for getting a PDF is to go save as from a particular view. We've got a PDF. And here's page options, which has to do with size. and document options, which has to do with the color here, and here's PDF options. And then here is so some options resolution. Not seeing anything that jumps out as showing how percentage fills are done. So that maybe there's some other place, or maybe on Windows it's different than Mac. I don't know there. But thank you, Stuart, for pointing that possible solution out. So Jay says, I sent an email of how the quick options can be viewed. Okay, I'll check that out. And I appreciate your thanks there. Vangai, thanks me, Brenton. All right, Tom, Ian, all of the positive comments. David Uguchi, hey David, it's been a long time. You weren't able to see most of the presentation because of work, but good to see I'm doing well. Thank you. All right, and Duratoy Paul, or Paul Duratoy, I hope you're doing great. Please, I have 2 buildings on one project and I want to separate their door and window schedule. Is there any way out? Good question. Glad you asked, so to speak. All right. I'm not going to try to set up 2 buildings right now, but I will show you the basic way that you can affect that. So let me just go here. I'm going to just pop in a window here. Okay. Now, when I do window schedule, doors and window, well, let's see if I do, yeah, doors and windows. Here's a window schedule. All right, so we're going to have one window, I believe. Here's W01. All right, there is, here the navigator is getting in the way of this because I don't have a dock. Let me dock it here. And then, I can see the scheme settings. So what are the scheme settings? They do choose, what are you going to list? Well, we're going to list windows. We don't want to include empty windows. We don't want to include windows that are being demoed. Okay, well, you can also add a criteria here that would have to do with the building. Okay, now, how could you know what building a window is part of? Well, let's think about some of the options. You can have an ID that's, let's say it's building A and B, and that they're numbered A101, A102, A103, and B101, 102, or whatever. And you could say that I want to only in this schedule have it where the element ID contains A. So then it's only going to show the windows that have that letter A as part of their ID. And then, you simply make sure that you're numbering your windows with some code like that. That would be the simplest, is just to build it into the ID and just list one window schedule with the ones that start with an A, etc. There could be other criteria. There could be other things. You can have properties that are associated with elements, and property could refer to the building. And then you could say, that the criteria is that the building is A or building is B. So that would be using properties as opposed to the ID. So let me just see if Duratoy, there we go. I'm going to open up your line and see if that has helped answer this question. Paul Duratoy, are you there? Your line is open. Okay, I'm not hearing it, so that hopefully gives you some clarity. So thank you all for joining me. If you're a member of the ArchiCAD coaching program, I'll be starting that call up in the next 5-10 minutes using the other link that we use for the calls, and we'll see whatever questions come up. And I see some thanks there. So from Will, etc. Okay. All right. So take care, stay well, get some exercise. I'm doing a lot more exercise than I had. See the doctor at least once a year, and make sure that you're following doctor's orders. I as I've said a few times, 4 years ago, I was told, you know, your cholesterol is high. You should really take medication to lower that. And I didn't do anything. And 4 years later, I'm in the emergency room saying, I'm having a hard time breathing. I'm feeling really bad. And they go, your EKG really is abnormal. We need to, you know, they put in stents. They opened up the arteries. Miracle of modern science. But I'm not going to take it for granted. I'm going to follow doctor's orders, get exercise, not push so hard, and enjoy my new lease on life, my next 20 years. So take care, everybody. Stay healthy and be well.